Lindsay Clancy's fate is now in the hands of 12 jurors as they begin their deliberations. Let's recap the closing arguments from this morning while we wait to see what their verdicts will be. The defense was up first, and Attorney Reddington reminded the jurors that Cora, Dawson, and Callan are the victims in this case. But he argued that the question they have been asked to decide is whether Lindsay was legally criminally responsible when she took their lives. Reddington repeatedly reminded the jury that Lindsay does not have to prove that she lacked criminal responsibility. It is the Commonwealth who has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she was criminally responsible. His argument was essentially that Lindsay was a loving mother who became profoundly mentally ill. The medications and what he called lousy medical care contributed to her deterioration, and that she was in a psychotic state when this happened on January 24, 2023. He attacked the police investigation, again pointing to things that he says investigators failed to test or collect, including the cup with powder and medication evidence. He also pushed back hard against the Commonwealth's suggestion that Lindsay's account of hearing a voice was unreliable. He reminded jurors that she reported hearing a voice to the hospital chaplain before Dr. Paul Zeisel had ever become involved. He also argued that there is no evidence that she was malingering. Reddington relied heavily on Dr. Philip Resnick, Dr. Zeisel, and Dr. Americo Condi, and essentially told the jurors the Commonwealth has not proven beyond a reasonable doubt that this woman was criminally responsible. Attorney Sprague was up next for the Commonwealth. She said that there is no dispute that Lindsay was mentally ill and no dispute that she actually tried to take her own life. According to the Commonwealth, that is not the question. The question is whether Lindsay understood right from wrong and whether she was capable of controlling her behavior at the time that she took the lives of her children, Cora, Dawson, and Callan. They argued that no provider who saw Lindsay leading up to January 24, 2023, observed psychosis, including at her appointment just one day before this happened. She also spent significant time arguing that Lindsay was not always fully compliant with medication instructions or completely forthcoming with providers about what she was experiencing. Then she moved into what the Commonwealth says is evidence of planning. She pointed to Lindsay searching for Kids Miralax at 4:02 p.m., searching for 3V Restaurant at 4:13 p.m., checking the drive time, then searching for and calling CVS, before asking Patrick to make both of those stops. The Commonwealth's theory is that Lindsay was calculating exactly how long Patrick would be gone so that she would have enough time alone with the children. They then walked the jury through the phone and movement evidence and argued that the children had already been strangled by the time Patrick called Lindsay from CVS at 5:33 p.m. Her point was that Lindsay was able to answer that call, speak normally, conceal what had happened, and continue with what the Commonwealth says was her plan. She also attacked the command voice account. She argued that the versions Lindsay later gave were inconsistent, that the alleged command itself did not tell her where, how, or with what to take the children's lives, and that Lindsay still had to make each of those decisions herself. The Commonwealth says those were her choices. The defense has said that those were actions of a woman in psychosis who lacked substantial capacity to understand or control what she was doing. And that is now the division and the decision that the jury will have to make. So what can the verdicts actually be in this case? There are 3 separate indictments, one for Cora, one for Dawson, and one for Callan, and this jury must consider each of those indictments separately, and they could come back with one of the following verdicts. They could find her guilty of first-degree murder, and if they do, they must unanimously agree that the Commonwealth proved deliberate premeditation, extreme atrocity, or cruelty, or both atrocity and cruelty. If they do not agree unanimously on first-degree murder, they can consider second-degree murder, so that is the second option. If the Commonwealth has not proven first-degree or second-degree murder, Judge Sullivan has instructed this jury to consider manslaughter based on wanton or reckless conduct. If they do not agree to first degree, second degree, or involuntary manslaughter, they could return a not guilty verdict. And that straight out not guilty verdict would mean that this jury says the Commonwealth has failed to prove the required elements beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, the other possible verdict is one that has been at the center of this case, and that would be not guilty by reason of lack of criminal responsibility. For that issue, the Commonwealth has the burden. If Lindsay has a mental disease or defect and because of it lacks substantial capacity either to meaningfully appreciate the criminality or wrongfulness of what she was doing or to conform her conduct to the law, then she can be found not criminally responsible. And Judge Sullivan specifically told this jury that a verdict of not guilty by reason of lack of criminal responsibility does not necessarily mean that Lindsay simply walks free. A petition for commitment would generally follow, and if she remains mentally ill and dangerous, those commitment orders can continue indefinitely and potentially for the rest of her life. Now, of course, just like in every other criminal case, whatever verdict these jurors come to, it must be a unanimous decision. This trial started with 18 jurors who have heard all of the evidence and all of the testimony, but at the end of the morning today, they drew out 6 names who are now alternate jurors, so they will not take part in the deliberations unless something changes and they need one of the alternates. So that means 6 people heard everything, but they may not have any say in what the verdict is. But 12 jurors have been selected, a 4-person has been selected, and they are now deliberating. This has been a very long and emotional trial. I will be back once the jury returns with a verdict. If there are any questions from the jury that are very interesting, I may come back before the verdict, but no matter when I return to give you another update, please remember the 3 children at the center of this case. They are what this has all been about. Rest in peace to Cora, Dawson, and Callan. May they receive justice, whatever this jury determines that is.